Republic of Mozambique, a southern African country with 21 million people, has been accredited as one of the few African countries that can boast of a stable democracy 17 years after the brutal civil war. Democracy has many shapes and forms, and can be practiced in many ways. We cannot assume that terms which originate in the West, such as democracy, are easily transferable to Africa. Scholars have said this is because the texture of Africa, with its diversity of ethnic groups, languages, constant occurrence of coups d'etats, civil wars, political corruption, not to mention the general absence of legally defined structures of governance, make Western star democracy almost impractical in Africa. So then, how do we define democracy in the African context, especially as it relates to the southeastern country of Mozambique? Teresa Cruz E. Silva, professor of religion at Eduardo Mondlane University in Maputo, Mozambique, defined democracy as a system through which elections are held to enable inclusion or exclusion for the access to power as manifested by the participation of people in the electoral processes. Throughout Mozambique's history, this inclusion and exclusion has resulted in citizens and organizations' involvement in governmental processes, including those with religious ties.
The Council of Churches has got moral power, moral authority, but it has no political or constitutional power. Some examples, the fact that we are members of the Electoral Observatory, and there is a parallel counting of votes, and often the Electoral Commission takes into consideration what is said by the Observatory. It shows the influence. But not only that, we do invite government leaders to come to some of the events that we organize, like services, either praying for a specific concern for peaceful solution to some of the difficulties. But there may be also cases where we feel that, for instance, we were the ones who insisted on the need for a dialogue as an end, as a way forward to end the war, not using guns. And the government did listen, did allow us to go ahead with looking for people with whom they could dialogue. I would describe our relationship with the government as we mutually respect one another. We are not used by the government, and we are not using the government, but we respect one another. What has happened in the past is part of history. At the present moment, we just, when there is work to be done, we try and do it.
For this reason, the role of religion in Mozambique cannot be underestimated, and to best understand such role, we've categorized the most widely practiced religions into four groups: Catholicism, Protestantism, Islam, and traditional spirituality. 16 main indigenous ethnic groups make up 99.6% of the Mozambican population. According to the International Freedom Report of 2009, one-third do not profess a religion or belief, and religious leaders believe that a significant proportion practice some form of indigenous religion, a category that was not included in the 1997 census.
Well, some of them, I have no doubt that they do practice their traditional things. They will never tell me. But I was saying that on Sunday actually, that I suspect that one of the reasons why we have some weaknesses in our Christian witness may have to do with mixing things. But let me explain that the purpose of the church, as far as I can see, the Anglican Church, is not necessarily to say all that is traditional is bad or wrong, but what you can baptize, what we can bring into the faith. Just to give one example, our solidarity towards one another in times of joy or sadness.
That is a quite complicated question to answer because you never know what happens in the mind of the people. But generally speaking, people, you know, I used to say that the African people are believers. You know, they have got their way of believing in such a way that Christianity came and found them in a certain pattern of belief. And what you can talk about is an encounter between the gospel and the culture of the people. And that culture that was not totally isn't of a certain belief, you know, this kind of traditional belief that we're talking about. So it is there, and Christianity came into that. And what I personally recommend, according to what I have learned when I was at school, is a kind of an encounter, a dialogue between these two. And that will actually enrich the gospel itself, but also the culture, you know, because the gospel, in my understanding, has got a transformative power. That power that can actually influence and transform to the best a given culture. But in my understanding, it will be incorrect to think that the gospel is to remove people from such kind of pattern of behavior. How do the gospel interact with culture, for me, is very crucial, because it brings an added value to what people are, and people make a contribution to what this good thing called gospel can impact their lives. Just to give an example, in the context of the African culture, for instance, you have the Ubuntu spirit as a dominant element, where we talk not about ourselves as individuals, but as a collective. So if you find someone and greet him in the road, you ask, "How are you?" in English, he will respond, "We are fine." Not "I am fine," but "we are fine." So that in his mind, for him to be well, it depends on how the others around him are. You understand what I'm talking about? So this kind of thing. And that can impact, in fact, the gospel itself. And so those things lead to a kind of a strong element of solidarity that sometimes is not there, and maybe the gospel, the way it came, did not bring those kind of components with it. And therefore, if well developed, and if a good encounter between the culture, a given culture, and the gospel comes in, and then you have something even better. Let me put it clear that I'm not saying that the church as a whole is supportive to the traditional or traditional beliefs in such a way. In fact, that what I have explained is that my point of view. But generally speaking, the church has actually had that kind of a problem. So what I can say is that one of the biggest problem I had with the way in which the church interact with what is there in the community is such kind of a thing, where they the churches traditionally would think that in meeting the person, in converting the person, you want the person to leave everything behind and embrace Jesus. I have got no problem with that. It's important to embrace Jesus, but we embrace Jesus as we are. You understand what I'm talking about? So Jesus want us as we are, and He wants to use us in a given and very special way as we are. We are a unity in a diversity. So we are not the same in terms of backgrounds, in terms of understanding things, in terms of experience that we have gone through, and all those things. But we come into this family through the belief in Jesus Christ, and I think that is crucial for me.
According to most Mozambicans, including some leaders of the Methodist and Anglican faiths, traditional spirituality is a part of culture and they cannot be separated. Although not considered a religion, local scholars claim that most of the population follows traditional spirituality, either exclusively or alongside organized religions such as Christianity and Islam.
Os instrumentos